Good morning, everyone.
Yes, they are from the stairs.
Okay, let's quickly mute everyone. Good morning and welcome to an amazing new session to the Expello Property Pulse. In Joburg, it is cloudy, and of course, if it's cloudy, the internet decided that they will decide who will do what. So in the chat, please say good morning. Tell us where we are. Zelda is in the background. Lizana is in the background. Zelda, you also admit people as they arrive and the participants, please. And we can make sure everybody is joining. Alreta, beautiful name. Welcome all the way from Middelburg, Mpumalanga, Blouberg. Yes, I was there last week, and the people in Cape Town, it is hot. And I mean, it is really hot. That's absolutely, it was terrible. I hope it's cooling down a bit. People from Pretoria, good morning. I'm seeing a lot of new names. Uitenhage. Please, Rochelle, tell me, how's the weather in Uitenhage? I think even some people don't even know how is the weather in Uitenhage. Morning. I love it. I'm seeing a lot of new faces, old clients, all of this. And we got to have an amazing session this morning. Oh, I'm loving it. I'm seeing all of these things. Claire, Helena, Almarie, Madri. And listen, I saw a lot of you guys at some of the We Connect You events and the property, pay prop events. And we said we want interaction. So at the bottom of the page, there's a reaction button. And you shouldn't be afraid to use it. So if we say something that you agree with, please give us a thumbs up. Let us know you are there. Rochelle is saying it's beautiful. It's 31 degrees. Phew, that sounds like a hot, né? And of course, if you have a question, please type it in the chat box. As we go through it, we will be addressing those questions and all of those type of things. So we have Shaun Luyt as our guest this morning, talking about lease renewals, because we've realized that there's still a lot of obstacles or things that needs to just to go through, and sometimes we run through the process that we don't realize. But before we get to Shaun Luyt, and as we are all ready to start the day, we are going to start our morning with Johan Janse van Rensburg. Now, Johan is our team leader of the legal department. And a lot of our clients love Johan because Johan is like the tipping point. I think, Johan, with every major problem in Expello, you have been involved. Good morning, Johan, and welcome.
Good morning, Elise, and good morning to everyone. Of course, when Elise and Shaun are on a webinar together, they mean business. So I'm just as excited as the participants.
Great stuff. Now, I see the slide is gone, Zelda. We just want to go back to Johan's face. Johan, so we want to start with this process where we say every month we want to give a tip from the breach department, the legal department, and some of the applications department, because sometimes people need to hear certain things more than once. So, Johan, please share your tip for today that's applicable to the topic.
Of course, Elise, I live by a simple rule. If your tenant has been a problem or defaulted more than once, don't lock yourself in twice. Avoid renewing a lease for a further fixed term if your tenant has consistently been in breach throughout the current fixed term. Past behavior is usually the best predictor for future behavior, especially when it comes to arrears, the thing we deal with most here at Expello. And of course, entering into a further fixed term or a renewed fixed term, you effectively limit your flexibility as compared to a month-to-month lease agreement. It's harder to get out of there if your tenant defaults. You need to give them 20 business day again. So ultimately, and of course, from Expeller's perspective as well, um, we also find that negotiating settlements um, on lease agreements that have been renewed for a further fixed term, where the tenant was a defaulting tenant, it makes our settlements much harder. Um, so that's my tip for the week. Again, I say, if there's been a problem or defaulted more than once, do not lock yourself in twice.
Yeah, and you say it so nicely, and I think we often hear where they go, "Oh no, there have been a problem for so many months, and then they went and renewed," and we all are super surprised. It's almost saying like, the marriage is not working, so let's have a baby, and hopefully, it helps the marriage relationship. It does not. It does not. A fixed term agreement does not fix stuff. Thank you, Anne. That is so valuable, and I hope with that tip and what we're going to hear from Shaun now, it's going to revisit. Shaun, good morning, my very good friend, a industry leader when it comes to trainings, lease agreements, tenants issues, and you are really into this. Thank you very much for taking the time and joining us this morning.
Good morning, everybody, and welcome. I'm just trying to, there we are, get my screen up and running. I think it's now shared. I see
Shaun,
that.
but we're seeing the presenter view. We're not seeing the full screen.
Hi, Bo. Okie
Yes.
dokie, let me fix that. Let me fix that. These things are sent to challenge us. Um, there we are.
There we go. There we go.
Okay, and you can see people are entering the waiting room still. So, good morning, everybody, and welcome. I've been asked by Elise to talk about some tips on lease renewals. And I must be honest and say lots of these tips and lots of these changes and lots of these updates that we've made to our lease renewals has been as a result of me and Elise having discussions with Ishmael, etc. So in the rental sphere, where we focus on rental agents, because rental agents do matter, we create processes and SOPs, I suppose you could call them. We call them our Pro Power Packs. So this is an excerpt from our Pro Power Pack. And I've taken what I think are the top 10 issues that one often experiences when things that we don't do and things that may later cause problems. And that I think is one of the things that when you are setting up your initial lease, we do a whole lot of things because we are doing the onboarding of the tenant, etc., etc. And then when it comes to renewals, often we don't do the checks and the balances that I think our landlords and our property owners deserve, and that help manage their risk going forward. Oopsie, Elise, somehow you managed to enter up in the middle of my screen, but don't worry, I'll just move you down. If you felt the world move, that was my fault. So, firstly, ladies and gentlemen, number one, lease renewal is not automatic. It is not automatic. And I did say that twice on purpose. Too many people, I'm afraid, in my experience, maybe it's just the people that call me when they have problems because they've relied on that clause in the Consumer Protection Act, Section 14, that says, on the expiration of the lease will convert to a month-to-month. And most lease agreements have it included as well. And it's taken us on a little bit of a detour in the wrong direction. I'll tell you why. A fixed term lease, when you sign a fixed term lease, as you know, there's a start date and an end date. We are contracting, the landlord is letting you stay in that property from the start date to the end date. The tenant is agreeing to stay in the property, well, agreeing to pay for the use of the property from the start date to the end date. A lease ends, it dies, pelile, gone, klaar, finish on the end date. And we forget too much about that because I think there was too much emphasis on the CPA conversion thing. The important point to say to you there, ladies and gentlemen, and I know there's probably a whole lot of people saying, Shaun, you don't know what you're talking about. bear with me. Let me explain quickly. It says in the CPA that on the expiration of the lease agreement, on the expiration of the lease agreement, the lease will convert to a month-to-month. When does the lease convert to a month-to-month? When does it expire, ladies and gentlemen? On the date and at the time that your lease specifies. So until that moment, it is ending. If your lease expires at 12 noon on the last day of the month, the tenant correctly believes they've signed a fixed term lease. They've packed all their belongings and they take their last suitcase out at 11 o'clock and they call you and say, where are you for your exit inspection? And you say, but you didn't tell me you were leaving. And they say, but I only had a fixed term lease. I don't have to stay. Then they can leave legally. They can leave legally. And that's one of the biggest dangers that we face. So please remember that a fixed term lease is fixed and it dies on its own. That's one of the most important principles I think that we need to be cautious of. And we'll touch on the 40 to 80 business day later soon. Sorry, Elise.
Yeah, so I'm going to interrupt you as we progress on that one,
Well, of course.
1, 2, 3. That's how we work, okay?
That's how we work. That's how we roll. That's how we roll. We must talk for all the people.
Shaun, and I think that was so valuable. And I just want to add here quickly, one thing that we have to remember is that when the lease expires, and I think especially, we're not talking when the tenant said, yes, I want to stay, and something came into place and they committed in writing. But we often see people just doing nothing. Time runs by and they wanted to do a lot of things. And then the next moment, the end of the month is here and the tenant didn't say anything and the agent didn't do anything. And then the next moment they up and leave. And then we are surprised. And the landlord is then upset with us. And then we go, okay, but remember it's going on a month to month. But the problem is it's not because they vacated. It's only if both parties, the landlord and the tenant, agreed and they continue to stay, that it goes on to a month-to-month basis. And I think that is, if I understand you correctly, if I summarized it, that's the instance. So please don't go into panic mode. That is something that we have to remember, that it happens. And I mean, we got very unique things. It's one of those, it's never been a problem, and then sometimes it pops up. But we don't want you as a property practitioner to be in troubles because you thought, well, it's just going to go out. If I don't do anything, I will be fine because it's going over to a month to month. We don't want that. So, Shaun, I love this one. This is the most important one. And I think this is also to keep in the back of your mind when you build onto your next one. What is your next tip?
The next tip is, my mouse is not talking to me. Confirm, check the tenant's breach status. Johanna's already stolen my thunder there, but it's so true. And this is one of them, Elise, that I did get from the discussion with you. Ladies and gentlemen, if somebody is already not adhering to the terms of the lease, and it's not always money, it can be noise, it can be car parks, it can be body corporate rules, it can be all sorts of things. If they are not adhering to the rules of engagement, in other words, the lease terms, why on earth would you extend their stay for another fixed period? Now, one of the things that happens often here is, so as part of our process, before we even do the 40 to 80 business day letter, what we do is we go and check their history. And we then go to the landlord because, ladies and gentlemen, we are not the PA to the landlord. And I say that very specifically. I'm not their lackey. I'm not their brew. I'm not their whatever you want to call it now, because I am their rental expert. And part of my job is to advise. We have this fiduciary relationship, which we're unpacking next month in a webinar, because it's a big word that means a huge amount of things. But what's important here is I need to go to them and say to them, in my expert opinion, it is not in your best interest for us to continue this relationship onwards. Think of yourself almost like a marriage counselor. No? It's not in your best interest to continue this relationship. Now you will sometimes have the landlord coming back and saying, No, but I want to, despite your expert advice. And then, ladies and gentlemen, we have a discussion about those implications. Johan already mentioned. If you're in a fixed term lease, Mr. and Mrs. Landlord, do you know that if they breach or it doesn't get better or it gets worse, because this is what happens, it gets worse and then you want me to get rid of them today. It doesn't work like that. The law doesn't allow me to. So I have to give them 20 business days notice. So you're going to be 2 months more in the hole, so to speak. Whereas, if we follow the risk managed approach, which could be an alternative, I have two alternatives if a landlord doesn't want to listen to me. I will either propose the risk managed approach, which is a month to month with a review date set at a certain date in the future, because in a month to month, what's the advantage in a month to month? Anybody want to say? It's that you can cancel on one calendar month's notice without having to go through the whole drama of evictions and all those things and CPA and that goedes, né? So that would be my risk managed approach. I made it sound fancy because we are fancy. Then the other alternative, and ladies and gentlemen, I've done this, is where I say, Mr. and Mrs. Landlord, I understand you want to continue despite our experts' advice. In this particular case, the risk is so high to my brand and my reputation that I unfortunately have to step away. I'm not able to manage, but I will do a re-signing for you, and that's going to be 4% of the contract value. So those alternatives, but please bear this in mind.
Yeah, Shaun, I love it. What you say is so true. Really weigh up, because some people are really terrible. You don't want them in your lives. And you know what's going to happen. You know the tenant is terrible, and you know it's going to be worse when the landlord gets upset. So that is very wise words.
And one thing here, please don't think that because the landlord is the contractor, in other words, is your principal, is your client, that you have to do everything that they say. When I say to people, but why did you renew or something like that? The most common answer I get is, the landlord said I must. Ladies and gentlemen, that's not our role. Honestly, that's not our role. I know it's difficult. You can get yourself into the poo-poo by just doing what landlords say. So you have to be able to say to them, look, I'm not saying this because I want the money as much as you, Mr. and Mrs. Landlord. But I don't want us to get into a problem, and I'm there to protect you. So we've got to take our role as an expert advisor and own it. I think that's very, very important.
I love that.
Another thing that often gets missed, and we've just added it we were on version 5 of our renewal thing. I think 3 versions have come in the last year because of experiences that we've had with our clients. Please make sure that you confirm that the tenant is going to be legally in the country. Of course, this doesn't count for citizens, this doesn't count for permanent residents, but anybody that's not one of those 2 classifications, make sure that they are legally in the country for the period that you're going to contract with them. Why? Because, ladies and gentlemen, unfortunately, there's a thing called the Immigration Act, or fortunately, it doesn't matter which way we want to see it, called the Immigration Act. And the Immigration Act says it is illegal to contract or provide housing or contract for a lease, basically, with anybody who's not legally in the country. So one of the other checks I do before we even go to the landlord with a proposal is we go and we check when is their current visa ending, if they're, for example, somebody that's here on some form of permanent, asylum, refugee, all those sorts of things. And when I go to the landlord, I'm showing my value. Yeah? And I'm saying to the landlord, Mr. and Mrs. Landlord, that person's permit, whatever it is, that their home affairs permission is going to end after 3 months after the end of this lease. So in my expert advice is we sign a 3-month, I'm using a ridiculous example, let's say it's 6 months. We only sign and commit to a 6-month lease. And once they have renewed with Home Affairs, we can review that and extend it further. And if they say, well, why? And I say, well, I'm not sure about you, but orange ain't on my color chart now, those orange overalls. If it's on yours, that's perfectly fine, but I have warned you. So, ladies and gentlemen, that's also important. And remember, when we come to the landlord, instead of the typical conversation, hello, Mr. and Mrs. Landlord, yeah, your lease is coming to an end now. Do you want to carry on? How much rent do you want? Okie dokie, I'll get it sorted. Instead of that conversation, I'm going to go to the landlord in terms of my documentation. I'm going to say, Mr. and Mrs. Landlord, as your rental advisor, I have to let you know your lease is coming to an end. The CPA requires us within 40 to 80 business days to blah, 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 blah. I've already done these background checks, and this is my advice. Does that not sound like a consultant, like somebody who's got value? If it does, pop one in the chat. If it doesn't, don't pop anything in the chat, I suppose. That's the best one.
I think even a thumbs up, Shaun, because as an investor myself, those type of things make it much easier to stomach that fact that I have to pay for the new agreement or anything, instead of why am I paying someone to just continue? It's a template that they're using and you don't see the value. So I love the fact that you're giving people today tips that you can use in your business, that you can show your value, and that you don't have to feel guilty or have to feel that you have to justify why you are getting your renewal commission.
I'm not begging for my money. I'm showing you where the value comes in. And later, one of the other questions, you take me on a slight tangent here, Elise, sorry. One of the other calls I often get, a very common call is, Shaun, the landlords just contacted me and said that they're going to look after the tenant themselves after the 12th month. What can I do? And I'm going to be frank today. I'm Shaun, but I'm going to be frank now. And the frank answer is, we've lost that value opportunity. When you, 3 to 4 months before the lease is ending, proactively contact the landlord and tell them all these things, do you think that they're going to want to manage this themselves going forward? Hi, bo. Because they're going to think, oh my goodness, I'm going to get in trouble and I'm going to end up in an orange overall. And so that is so, so important. And I think that's important because you're showing your value without saying, oh, I do this, I do this, I do this, I do all these things. That's not the whole point. The point is I'm showing it to you. And I'm showing what the implications are of going solo, so to speak.
Fantastic.
The next thing, ladies and gentlemen, let's not ask the landlords how much they want. They've employed us. One of our fiduciary responsibilities is to make sure that financially they are in the best position. I didn't know this. No? That's why we're doing a seminar on that next month. But that's one of our fiduciary responsibilities. So we need to go to the landlord and say, I've done a current market appraisal. You can do this. It doesn't take you that long to do it. This is what's on the market. That's what's on the market, blah, 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 blah. And then you can have a discussion saying, in the current market, I believe you can get whatever it is that you can get. And then you can make a recommendation to say that because this is such a good tenant and it's really hard to find good tenants, maybe we suggest that we look at this amount to be able to retain these people. But what have I done? Once again, I've showed value. Do you think that landlord is going to say to me they're going to self-manage afterwards? No, the chances are tiny because they can't do this fancy stuff that I do. So I think that's really, really important.
And Shaun, I actually I saw this in one of my conversations with my clients last week in Cape Town. They said in the one complex, there was so high demand and there was no stock. So the rentals were high and people were getting very nice prices because demand was high. And suddenly there was a shift. And suddenly there's so big availability. And so now they can't get these high rentals because there's 7 units available and they can pick and choose. And now to go back to the owner and say, listen, you can't compare to last year because this is what's happening. And that's sometimes people don't understand it because you just think it's going to forever go up. It's forever going to be high. And that's not always the case.
No, and I think it's so important for us to show that we are the experts at this particular time. If I call someone and say, how much do you want? brew or whatever. Now, if I do that, then surely they think, but what on earth are they paying me for? Because I'm just taking orders. We need to get the confidence. We need to stand our ground and we need to show that we are the experts throughout this process. Bottom line is you are doing this in any case. You are doing this in any case, in your head, in your sleep, however you're doing it. Make sure that they understand the value, because then you are going to have a relationship of trust. And a relationship of trust is so important, because then we don't get these sorts of situations where they just say to you something like, when you give them like real, proper, good advice, they don't say, but I'm the client, do what I say. You don't have that happening when you have a relationship of trust. Number 6, ladies and gentlemen. Oh, sorry, Elise.
Sean, sorry, I'm going to quickly interrupt you. Kim asked great questions. And I want to ask this question before we jump into point number 6, which is a good topic. But she says, if the landlord and the agent does not want to renew the tenant's lease because the tenant has defaulted throughout the lease period or for whatever reason, what would be the best way to advise the tenant that we won't be renewing, especially if the tenant insists on renewing? And Sean,
Okay.
sorry, if we're going to touch on this topic a bit later, please tell me, and then we can hold the question.
No, this is the perfect time. It's point number 6. Point number
Okay.
6 gives you the answer. Point number 6 gives you the tool. The Consumer Protection Act says that if your lease falls under Section 14 of the Consumer Protection Act, and if you've got a natural person landlord and a natural person tenant, then you definitely, in a fixed term lease, you are falling under that section. It says, it's given you the tool. It's given you the tool. It says 40 to 80 business days prior, in other words, before the end of the lease, the landlord, in brackets, or the landlord's agent, must notify the tenant, and it goes specifically of their impending end date and any options open to them. That's more or less what it says in plain English. Now, ladies and gentlemen, if the landlord is not going to renew, you do not have to give them a reason. That's the difference between buying and renting. No? He owns it. He can decide if he wants to extend. He can't just wake up one morning and say, this tenant is making me gutful, I'm going to end that lease now. He doesn't have that right if he's got a fixed term lease, he or she. I don't want to be sexist here now. He or she. But the law says we have to send out this letter. We have to tell them, let's say, for example, what are we now, Elise? March.
We're in March, yes.
Mr. Tenant, your lease is coming to an end on the 31st of July, 2026. The landlord has instructed us that they will not be renewing the lease. So we will be in touch. I know this is very short, but I'm thinking off the top of my head, we have letters drawn up that help you with this. But saying, if you want us to help you find new accommodation, etc., we can assist you. But the reality is, you do not have to give a reason. And my advice is very clearly, don't give a reason. I don't even ask the landlord a reason. I don't want to know the landlord's reason. And if I do know it, I forget I know it and I deny I know it. Because as soon as you start saying, oh, but it's because you're untidy. Oh, it's because your kid drew pictures on the wall. Ladies and gentlemen, you're going to end up in a tribunal. These people are going to be calling all sorts of things there. So let's not go down the route. The reality is you have a tool. The tool is quite simple. It's actually also, this is another thing. This point number 6 gets skipped far too often. It's far too often. I also want to make it clear that the 40 to 80 business day notice is not part of renewals. I know I've confused you by putting it in today's session. It's not part of renewals. It comes before renewals. It comes before renewals because remember when we're going to get to the end of the lease, it's going to frick, né? It's going to die. It's going to be pelile, né? It's going to be finished. Now, as we do when we're riding, you listen to your GPS, it says, in 2.5 kilometers, you're going to talk left. In 2.3 kilometers, you're going to, so not talk left, go left. This is the same thing. In 3 months, the lease is going to die. What are we going to do about it? And that's when we have those discussions, and that's when we let them know. It is the fork in the road. If I say that fast, it's going to sound ugly, but it's the fork in the road. It's when we are preempting that we're going to go to a fork in the road, and before we hit the fork, we are going to decide which way we're going to go. And we can speak to the landlord about potentially not renewing. We can speak to the landlord about if you think it's a problem that can be resolved, or if the landlord in their imagination or their dreams thinks it's a problem that can be resolved. And I use those words on purpose because I've had situations where the landlord will be like, no, no, don't kick them out. Oh, no, no, no. They're waiting for money. They said it's coming. And then what happens when it doesn't come? Somewhere the problem gets too big. Somewhere somebody gets tired. Somewhere somebody gets plain simple gatvol. And then they expect us to change the world. But we can't change the world if we're then stuck in another fixed term lease or something like that. So I hope that answers Kim's question, Elise. But
it does, Shaun. It does.
We have that tool. It's a parliamentary, I would almost say a God-given tool, but it's not exactly. It's a parliamentary tool, one that we can actually use to our favor now, and we can't get fined for it. So I think that's the most important. But it's very important to remember that the 40 to 80 business day letter is telling them what their options are to turn right, left, go ahead when we hit the fork in the road, which is coming up in a few months' time. And then renewal may lead out of that, but it's only one of the branches of that fork.
Yeah, Shaun, I want to add there because before we jump again I think this is so vital, and I love what you said. This is actually not part of the renewal or the process before the term. It's a step beforehand, but it's so vital because it determines if you're going to renew. And I want to ask all property practitioners out there, I think it almost justifies a call sometimes because we're seeing more and more people. I'm getting a lot of these, Shaun, I assume you as well, where they go, oh, I renewed 3 months in, my landlord is telling me he's selling the property. And I'm going, but when you had the discussion, we're going to renew, did you not ask your landlord, what is your plans for the next year? Do you intend selling it? Because that has a big impact on whether it's the CPA or not the CPA. And, is it going to be fair towards the tenant to renew for a year and you want to sell it after 3 months? That's why people are having struggles with access to property because they didn't communicate this with the tenant. Because if you recently moved, you would remember it's not nice moving. Nobody wants to move every 6 months. So have the conversations, make sure that they are ready to commit for the next period. Don't just take it as a normal assumption. Not all people are seasoned investors and have those planning. So please make sure about that. Shaun, the second thing...
sorry, carry on.
No. I want to... Kim has got a second question I just want to answer because it was relating to your other thing, but what did you want to say?
No, I just wanted to say, I've just made a note in my piece of paper. No, you can see that. Anyhow, that we must ask the landlord if they intend selling in the next 12 months as well when we do this whole prep work for our 40 to 80 business day letter, because then I can better advise them as to the investment, the most investment advantageous lease structure to continue with. Because we have this issue where there's clauses in the lease that say you can give the tenant notice, etc., when the property is being sold. But if you go to the Western Cape Housing Tribunal, they say very clearly, sorry, hier gaat voorkoop. So we would not uphold such a notice. Yes. So one has those situations. So it's important to have that discussion also with the landlord. None of us can predict the future. We know that. I had a crystal ball, but I think it was stolen or it fell. One way or the other, it doesn't exist anymore, and it doesn't work, and it's very cloudy here in the Kaap. So I think that's an important thing. So now you've given me an idea, and now I'm thinking of version number 6 already, but I'm not going to do that for a few months. Sorry, Elise.
But this is amazing, and I think this is what we realize and that's why these property pulse sessions are so important, is because everything is evolving the whole time. Mm-hmm. It's not just we getting weird tenants, but I'm seeing things that we've been doing every day. Sometimes we need to shift, we need to add, we need to take away stuff that's been great, but now it's no longer applicable. Kim, I'm going to read your question and then I'm going to somewhat answer it. It is, if a corporate lease was signed and the occupants of the property is on a working visa that is in the process of being renewed, should we follow up to see if the occupants was able to extend their working visas if the lease is procurement lease? If the lease states that the onus is on the tenants to ensure they are legally in the country, I would imagine we still need to do our diligence in this regard in terms of following up. Kim, I think from my side is, remember, you're contracting with the company and the company has an obligation. They cannot employ illegal people in any event. So they have the labor on this, on them, immigration and a lot of that. So put the onus on them. If you know they are illegally, you basically have to place the tenant on terms and say you are not abiding by the lease agreement, you're going to cancel. And then technically the company has to evict them and get rid of them. So I think it's not a clear-cut question. I'm trying to make it sound easy, but I mean, we can delve into that on another day. I hope it gives you a bit of guidance. Shaun, what is your point 7?
My point 7, I was just going to comment on that one and say I would simply stop at the level of the company because they're my contracting party. But yes, point 7, update or confirm tenant information. A lot of the renewals that I think, and this is where we started with one of our, what you call it, one of our updates, is where the following situations happens. Let's take me for an example. I was working for Harcourts when I entered into my lease agreement. My email address was Shaun at Harcourts, Shaun.Luyt, sorry, I wasn't that famous, Shaun.Luyt at Harcourts.co.za. That is what's written on my lease agreement.
That's all what they do.
Oh, next.
Sorry, we're just going to quickly mute someone there. Sorry.
That's what's written in my lease agreement. Now, somewhere along the line, I went solo. No? And when I went solo, I changed my email address to Shaun@rentalsphere.co.za. Now, when they send me their statements, etc., they send it to me at Shaun@rentalsphere.co.za. That's perfectly fine. But now let's say I breach the lease and I have to be sent an LOD. What will typically happen is you will go onto your software and you'll say, breach of lease, Shaun owes 50,000 Rand, give him 20 business days to pay, and you say send. But now, because Shaun@rentalsphere.co.za is on your system that you're sending it from, it goes to Shaun@rentalsphere.co.za. And Shaun@rentalsphere.co.za is having a really, really tough month or year or whatever part of his life, and Shaun ignores you. Now what do? You go to Elise and you say evict, or you go to an eviction lawyer and you say evict, and they say, send us all the documentation. They go through and they say, oh, but wait, you send the LOD to Shaun@rentalsphere.co.za. You say, of course, because that's what the guy talks to me on, man. That's what the WhatsApp and all that hooters. And then she says, but in the lease, it says Shaun.Luyt. That changed years ago. But, ladies and gentlemen, where the problem comes, hey, how did I put my hand up? Hey, I saw me do it on purpose. But so what happens is now, remember when you go to the lease, the legal delivery of notice is contained in clause whatever of your lease, and it refers back to that email address that's on the first page. Now, we're 10 years into the lease, and you've done one-page renewals all the way through, and all you've ever done is says, Shaun is going to continue to lease from Mr. Landlord at this property, and his rent is going to be this. And that's all you've done in your renewal documentation. Ladies and gentlemen, it causes a problem later. Now, because of our responsibilities, we can be held liable for those sorts of losses if we are to blame. Because besides the fact of being the professionals and being able to get a better fee, it also means we have a lot of responsibility on our shoulders. So it's very important that when you do your renewals, check things like, obviously, the rental amount. Confirm and update key tenant information. And I said tenant there, and landlord information, because that will also help. Then you need to look at your mandate as well. Also, where was I going to say? Make sure that renewal is correct and update details that may have changed. And ladies and gentlemen, I must admit, I'm allergic to one-page addenda for many, many reasons. And let me explain this also with an example. Because if you're doing one-page addenda all the time, okay? And these days with electronic signatures, it doesn't really matter, in my opinion. You don't have to fax these gooders. It's not based in fax paper and gooders like that. But when you're doing one-page addenda, most 99.9% of the terms are coming from the original lease agreement. Only the changed things are on the addendum. All the other stuff stays the same. So I remember, and I just mentioned this to Elise this week, we're talking about something else. You did a training at King David's golf course. And I remember there was a lady there. And we were talking about updating things. And she was like, but I've had that landlord for 26 years. Must I really go and update? Well, ladies and gentlemen, let's say that you have a lease agreement that's more than 5 years old or more than 6 years old, the original. You've only done one pages since then. Now you email and it gets to Elise, and Elise says, where's your lease? And your lease says carrier pigeon. No? Something like that. And she says, but you didn't send a carrier pigeon. You say, because they're all frack, man. The war in Iraq shot them all with the drones, né? Or something like that. The bottom line is we're not updating. We're not giving the best service to our landlord. We're not giving them best protection. We're not mitigating their risk. Because if we take something like the TPN lease, which is the most commonly used one, the TPN lease, they update it regularly. I don't say update it every month. You'll go crazy. But look at it, because when they update it particularly based on experiences they've had in court to try and close gaps. So I think it is important that we, as often as possible, use a full lease, and be careful that if you are using an addendum, that you have certain information in it, at least minimum information. What have I said? I said this information. I've got some more just now.
Shaun, I want to add one thing. I always say to people, remember, you update your apps. So if you can update your app, you can update your software, please update your lease. Point number 8.
Yeah, no, I agree with you totally. Re-vetting and rechecking affordability. What's happening? Let's forget about what we do for a living. What's happening at this point in time? Somebody is saying, or we've said to somebody, we'll sign another 12-month contract with you. Okay? The rent is going to be 500 Rand higher or 1,000 Rand higher than what you're currently paying. Would you like to go ahead or not? This is essentially what is often happening. What I'm not asking them is, do you still have a job? Have you decided to become self-employed? Has your income increased sufficiently to make me comfortable on this new rental amount? And if you think about it, it's almost like we're flying blind into the future, aren't we? So there's certain checks that I think as a minimum, and once again, when I write my 40 to 80, or my request for the 40 to 80 business day letter info to the landlord, I'm saying, whatever we put to them will be subject to the following: utility deposit top up, normal deposit top up, checking their work status, checking those things. Now, if you have something like the TPN tenant monitoring process, then obviously you don't have to do credit checks and stuff again. And I'm not going to tell you exactly what you must do. All I'm going to say is I think it's imperative on us to at least say, listen here, we're putting the rent up. We don't know what's happened in your life over the last 12 months. Are we still safe or not? In a sense, the way I hope that's making sense, Elise. You have to, in any case, ladies and gentlemen, do re-FICA. FICA says when you renew, you re-FICA. I can't tell you what you have to re-FICA. You're going to have to look at your own risk management and compliance program on that. But I know that at the very least, and if it's not in your risk management and compliance program, there may be a problem. But at the very least, you've got to check the TFS list. I advise you look at adverse media, those sorts of things. So it's important that we at least do some form of this to make ourselves comfortable. And if they're not so lacquer on the criteria, let's say they fall slightly under it, it doesn't mean you're not going to offer it to them. It doesn't mean that you're going to say to the landlord no, because history also plays a role, and you do have 12 months of history with you. But you need to just have it in your mind in case something, and big life changes happen. Wow, I've spoken about this already, talking about the full lease review. Let me just see if there's anything extra added. Oh, Yes, 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 yes. Let's think about where we're at. Have we had somebody messaged me about one of these yesterday, a water leak at the property. Yesterday it was a water leak I'll tell you what happened yesterday. They called me. It was a landlord or an investor that said they had a water leak at the property. It cost 40,000 Rand. It was reported by the tenant to the agent, but the agent did not do anything about it. Can they hold the agent liable? Ladies and gentlemen, unfortunately, there's only one answer there. And unfortunately, that answer is probably yes. Well, it's two answers now. It's got a probably. Water. So if you've had problems with people paying utilities, if you have had water leaks, if you had those things, this is the time to say to the landlord, Mr. and Mrs. Landlord, I remember that 60,000 Rand that you had to go and find now to pay the water leak because of that thing that happened and nobody had any money. Maybe we should get a prepaid meter. Now they are probably going to say, yes, please, Shaun, why didn't you ask me earlier? Because in the course of a lease, it's difficult for us to change these things now because we already have this lease agreement and we can't just so much change things left, right, and center. But now you can. So think about these things too. Prepaid electricity. Think about what has changed. And this is why I say it's so important. Another reason, if we look at that point there, the third point, in the course of the last 2 years at least, I know that the TPN lease has been updated to make provision for things like on-charging of those fixed electricity charges and all those sorts of gooders there. Like Joburg had them, Ekurhuleni, I think, had them. Cape Town's got a new cleaning fee one, but that's in court somewhere. Those things change in a year. In your area, things have changed in a year, and that's another reason why we need to go back to the original lease terms. Because now what happens if you do the one-pager now, and now all of a sudden the landlord said, but I was speaking to my friend Susie over the weekend, and Susie says she doesn't pay for this stuff. Susie says her tenant pays. And I say to them, hey, serious? Let me go have a look. And I see, no, but the lease I used is 3 years old or 2 years old. And it says nothing about that stuff because we didn't have that stuff in that point in time. We're not protecting our landlord. But if I say to them, yes, but haven't you noticed we've started doing that because we update our leases to protect you and minimize your risk at least annually. Your value. And it's such a small thing. It really is a small thing, ladies and gentlemen. So renewal is an opportunity to update and align the lease terms so they remain enforceable, and we can look at things like prepaid utilities. And then, ladies and gentlemen, and I thought of something yesterday that I actually can't say publicly, so I'm just going to keep quiet. I'm going to try my best to keep quiet so I don't get into trouble. But they say the job isn't done until the paperwork is done. And that's where my thought went to a place I can't mention. But so the reality is, this is where often it all falls apart on such a small thing, where people will go through all of that. There will be an agreement in principle, but your lease says that in your clause, there's normally an entire agreement clause in your original lease agreement. And it'll say, nothing changes. You can't, it doesn't really mean nothing changes. You're going to lose if you go to a dispute, if you don't get this in writing and agreed, or documented and agreed. Ladies and gentlemen, I know I normally say both parties, and I apologize if I'm the cause of your distress. All parties. I must change that. It's all parties. If there's three tenants must agree. If there's two landlords must agree. I had a case the other day where they said to me, oh, he had a fight with his girlfriend. She's left and she gave us notice. And I said, oh, who's on the lease? He said, him and her. But she wants her deposit back. I said, but she's still got to pay the rent. She is still responsible for the rent. They said, but it comes from his account. I said, I don't care where it comes from. The bottom line is if it stops coming from his account, you can make it come from her account. So remember these, when people go into a contract, and I know this it sounds really cheeky, but it's just true. When people go into a contract, we assume point number one, the law says you've got to be 18. For some odd reason, the law thinks we're sensible enough when we're 18. Eh? So you're 18, you can now sign a contract. And it also says, if you're in love, or if you're best buddies, you can sign it together. But it doesn't say when you have a fallout, the whole thing disappears. It doesn't happen. Ask people who got divorced. No, it can carry on for years and years and years. I don't have that experience. No, this is probably why I'm single, committedly single, no, committed to myself. But no, yeah, so it's important that these things get documented. Please document it, whether you do it with your 1 or 2 pager. We talk about 1 pages now, but I don't think there's such a thing as a 1 page anymore. I think it has to be at least double-sided. 1 page, but at least double-sided. Because what I also want to do here is, if, for example, and if you have a look on my blog, there is tips for lease renewals. There is an article on the blog for that, and Elise and I worked in conjunction with her to expand on the normal, simple renewal addendum to work in these sorts of things like updated information. The way we drafted that one was say that the parties hereby confirm that this is their current information, or / notify us that this is their new information. So even if we have done that and they now say it's their current information, I think we have a plausible reason that we can explain why we sent it to Shaun@rentalsphere.co.za, although the original lease says otherwise, because 2 months ago they confirmed that they will. And I think it says there's something about legal notices or something in there as well. And Elise, that's my tips, unfortunately. But can I just put in a word and say that if anybody wants the full, that's only touching the surface. We have 2 full webinars, and Elise is I almost said an extra in one of them. She's more than an extra. I'm sorry. She is a star in a co-star in one of them.
Oh, Shaun. Listen, they said we missed point number 5. Can we quickly go back to point number 5? I think
Is that why you were scrolling in my points just now? Oh, you quite.
I was taking up the compliments.
Who picked up that I missed point number 5?
No, there was quite a couple. So Lizette did, and where's the other lady?
Oh, sorry.
She actually, so she brought it up as well.
I get so excited now, so I must skip over points. Okay, so
number 5.
This has to do with deposit. Is the deposit still adequate? Do we need to look at the top-up deposit? What about utilities? This is where the parties that I had, if there's been late payments, dispute, arrears, I somehow that part got stuck in my head. Then we look at maybe talking changing the utility structure. And also don't forget your utility deposits. Utilities, everybody's saying, electric has gone up so much. My 100 Rand only lost 2 hours now, just the last 2 weeks. Remember, though, that if they're on postpaid, it just means that last invoice is going to be bigger. So please keep us or keep your landlord up to date and protected with those as well, if you do have them. Oh, sorry, I've got another one in front. You know why I skipped it? Because I have 2 slides in front of me. My sincerest apologies. We'll give you a, what you call it? What you call when you pay people money back?
Oh, refund.
We'll give you a refund. No, it'll be 10% of what you paid for the webinar. We'll give you a refund because of my error. Elise, that really brings me to all of it. So I do apologize. Although I did seem to somehow fit it in, I think I was a little bit funny in my eyes.
Shaun, I want to say thank you very, very much. Your insights helped so much. And I think really it helps us and guides us a lot. So what you do often, I want to give you a quick opportunity, is Shaun has, if you don't know, they've got the Rental Sphere club, Shaun.
I've just shown a picture of me on the screen.
Yeah, that guy's got more hair, but Shaun, you're definitely more handsome.
No, Elise, you missed that's a wig. That's how yes, that's what I've got. That's my winter look. This is my summer look. Yes, ladies and gentlemen, we do have an inner circle, and seeing that Elise invited me, I will take the opportunity to let you know that's where we help protect rental agents. So if we look at our inner circle, essentially we've got 2 live webinars every month. Elise is on one tomorrow with me talking about how to deal with applicants under debt review. We've got a full replay library of over 60 hours of replays on the topics that we cover. We cover these sorts of practical topics, not, that normal gobbledygooky stuff. We also I've spoken a lot about our letter templates and all that stuff. That's also available to members. And we have a legal and supplier network and WhatsApp support. So when I talk about these people calling me, it's not that they just call me and I answer my phone and I talk to any Tom, Dick, and Harry, Jan, Piet, and Sari, I suppose. But anyhow, those ones, it's our members can contact me via WhatsApp at any point in time. If I can can I run through this quickly, Elise? Just quick.
Yeah, you've got 1 minute.
Okay. If you look at our recordings, the value there is 29,400. If you look at our live expert sessions over 12 months, you're getting about almost 12,000 rands worth of value. Our packs are on their own, very detailed. You can ask Elise, and they're worth about 50,000. And our exit WhatsApp support, well, I mean, to be honest, most people say to me, it just simply doesn't have a value. It's beyond value, because when you're in problem, when you have a problem, I answer. So the total value is that. And if you have a look at our plans, we have solo plans and team plans, starting from $299 for solo plans and $999 per month. But we've just created annual plans, and for some other reason, people seem to love those ones. So, ladies and gentlemen, that's how we can answer your questions any single day of the week.
Shaun, that is absolutely amazing. While that's on, I want to say Corinne is, for example, saying it's a no-brainer, the inner circle, it's worth gold. And clearly there is some of the members on here, so please consider it. Scan the QR code. I do see there's a lot of there's a lot of value to that. Shaun, from my side and the Expeller team, and thank you very much for making yourself available today. I really appreciate it.
Have I unshared myself?
You're going to stop sharing just now. So before everybody run off, we still have 2 minutes. We're on the time. And as we deal with all of these renewals and things, we also want to just touch up on base and quickly check in with Lizanne, where she comes from, the client services, because there's a lot of tenants that stays on our with us during the 12 months and thereafter. Lizanne, welcome, and thank you for giving us your insights this morning.
Good morning, Elise. Thank you so much. Good morning, everyone. So from applications side, the only thing I would like to share with you is once you do a renewal and the application is on our services, you can just purely send it to our applications email that I will just drop in the messages. It is very important, like Shaun said, a lot of information can change, and then we can update everything on our side accordingly. I also just want to mention quickly that if a tenant moves to another unit, for example, what we will need is the lease agreement and then the previous property's rental statement for the past 3 months, just to confirm that they did pay on time and in full. So that is that from my side.
Thank you, Lizanne. Shame we're putting you on the tight thing, but what Lizanne is saying is super important, because we do see this. We're seeing that fundamental information change, and you guys don't update it with us. And just with Shaun's scenario, Lizanne, you've seen this as well. They go, oh, yeah, but the girlfriend moved out long ago. So please speak to the boyfriend. Oh, speak to his new girlfriend. Like, no. We need to know these things. So help us be prepared to proceed working. Just send us the updates. It doesn't have to be intense. And listen, my team is going to have a look, and they are going to ask you to confirm at least. Are you satisfied that they can actually afford, especially if there's an increase? Because, we're there to have your back and also make sure everything runs smoothly. Lizanne, as always, thank you very much for your time. I appreciate it. Everyone, we're coming to the end of the call. Our next Property Pulse seminar is on the 15th of April, 2026. We are having Lightstone joining us to that day, just with a bit of stats, seeing what's happening in the market, what is the information. I know a lot of people saying, Elise, but we property practitioners working with rentals don't use Lightstone. But we attended a seminar and she shared such information. And I think that's something that you guys need to know, especially if you deal with investors. So I've on this stage, I'm so sorry, that application's email address is wrong, clearly a typing error, but the correct one is in the chat, and that's the bridge. And of course, if you're not using our portal is making your life easier. It's giving you access, it's giving you power, it's giving you insight. Yes, I like that. Ne? So please get registered on it. If you don't know how, please reach out to Lizon. I know everyone is very busy, and I truly appreciate your support and your time this morning. I hope you guys have learned a lot, and thank you very much for joining.